Michael Cimino had barely re-entered the editing room when the bloodbath started. The first body to fall was Andy Olbeck's. "We had a bad year," he told friends privately. "When you have a bad year, you fire the boss." In Olbeck's place, Transamerica installed Norbert Auerbach, the UA executive who had guaranteed David Field's worst-case number 2 years earlier. In late April 1981, 5 months after its disastrous first screening, a radically recut version of Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate opened in Los Angeles.
Okay, Michael Cimino. Mr. Cimino is here.
And as Michael makes his way...
Cimino has worked literally day and night re-editing Heaven's Gate. It now runs 2.5 hours. That's an hour and 10 minutes shorter than it was, thanks to some 300 changes. Ballpark figure, $35 million the first time around. I did a little arithmetic. 100 American families making $25,000 a year each. Money for a single movie.
I think that one has to understand what the motives were. Is it obscene to spend $30 or $40 million on a blatantly commercial effort whose sole purpose is to make more money? Is that obscene?
The nature of Gene Shalit's questions, to ask how many starving orphans could have been fed forever, what is it? That doesn't have anything to do with the picture as a picture. And it was the perceived enormity of waste and arrogance with money that people were focusing on.
There was, however, one dissenting rave. Kevin Thomas, the LA Times film critic, wrote, "Heaven's Gate is an experience that leaves you feeling you have witnessed a true screen epic." He called the acting splendid and noted the level of craftsmanship could scarcely be higher. "It is time," he concluded, "to sit back and enjoy all that Michael Cimino has wrought." Thomas later noted, "I don't think in 20 years of movie reviewing I've ever been so totally alone."
Vincent Canby of the New York Times has seen the new, shorter version, and he wrote that the movie looks like a fat man who's been on a crash diet. Thinner, but not appreciably different.
Worst movie I ever saw. Really, terrible movie.
Gorgeous music, gorgeous photography, but it's a real fanny twitcher.
I think it still needs some pruning, frankly.
It was a little long, it was a little boring, and I don't think it was the story people wanted to hear.
The press's obsessions, starting with Les Gapé and bleeding into Vincent Canby, overwhelmed whatever virtues Cimino's film had. Heaven's Gate cost United Artists $44 million to make and release. In the end, its total gross was $1.3 million. It was time to dump the next body overboard.
I knew that I was going to be fired. It was in the air. There was just no way that I was going to survive. Who else are they going to fire to make a point? They were going to make a corporate point that something disastrous has happened and we have lanced the boil by firing Stephen Bach.
A few days after Stephen Bach was fired, Transamerica announced that it was selling United Artists to MGM. It was tired of having its corporate image tied to a failing studio, tired of the movie business. The studio that Mary Pickford, Charlie Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith had started 60 years earlier was gone. Hollywood gasped. The unthinkable had happened. A single film had sunk a studio, or so it seemed. Michael Cimino and Norbert Auerbach were at the Cannes Film Festival when the headlines broke. Auerbach, shocked by the news, took the occasion to blame Heaven's Gate for all that was wrong in Hollywood.
I didn't realize the extent of it, really, until Cannes. When I looked at the newspaper and a thing that was written by Auerbach, who was the president of UA, who had said that unless control of the money was taken away from the creative people, that the industry was headed for disaster. And we ran into each other in the hallway on the way to this press thing on where we're all going to be sitting on a stage, and he and his lawyer were there. And I said, who are you going to give it to? The uncreative people? And so the uncreative people won. And that's what happened to the business.
You could argue almost that post-Michael Cimino, the time of the director was over. He single-handedly, whether fairly or unfairly, was the signpost that said, from now on, we're not going to let directors have that kind of power anymore. Because we don't want our studio maybe to go next, or we don't want anybody to do that to us.
Heaven's Gate was received warmly, even enthusiastically, by the critics in Europe, where today it is recognized as an accomplished work of art. But in America, a cloud still hangs over Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate. It is known as the biggest flop ever, the film that bankrupted a studio. The truth is, Transamerica was a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. It wrote off the entire loss of Heaven's Gate, $44 million, 2 days after its New York premiere. Its stock fell 0.5 point, which it fully recovered the next day. In the 25 years since Heaven's Gate, much has changed. Box office totals are now tracked by every media outlet in the country, and films are judged a success or failure in a single weekend. The business of Hollywood has overwhelmed everything else, and it's hard to see how the movies are better off for it. And what of Heaven's Gate? For most, it's just a cautionary tale, an interesting footnote. But for others, Heaven's Gate is a beautiful, ambitious film just waiting to be rediscovered.
I would respond to Heaven's Gate the same way Jack Kennedy responded to the Bay of Pigs. I take full responsibility, and all other questions are answered by the film itself. I think if you're a boxer and you step into the ring, you can't complain about getting hit.
I think about Heaven's Gate all the time because I live in the horror house set from Heaven's Gate in Montana. That's my home there. When we were finished shooting that set, the owners of the land were going to burn it down. Michael said, anybody want this set? And I shot my hand up, numbered the logs, and moved it a couple of 100 miles south, and that's where it stands today.